Picture a room about the size of a generous dining hall. Now fill it with steam so thick you can't see the woman standing 3 feet away from you. Add the smell of boiling blood and lye and wet wool and something underneath all of that. Something animal and sweet and wrong. And put the temperature somewhere between a hot bath and the inside of a furnace. Then add the sound of 40 women working in silence because the rules say no talking, and the slap of wet linen against stone, and the grinding shriek of the mangle turning, and the cough that every woman in this room has developed because their lungs have been breathing this air for years. That's a Victorian commercial laundry. That's where you're going tonight. Not as a visitor, not as a customer who drops off her silk blouses and picks them up again on Thursday, perfectly pressed, smelling of starch and lavender, with no idea what happened to them in between. We're going in through the back door, the one the delivery carts use, the one that opens before 5 in the morning when the fires are already lit, and the copper boilers are already filling, and the women are already arriving in the dark with their sleeves rolled up and their hair pinned back and their hands already dry and cracked from yesterday. We're living one day inside a Victorian laundry, the 1870s, London, a city of 4 million people, most of them generating linen at a rate that boggles the imagination. Sheets and shirts and petticoats and tablecloths and napkins and aprons, and the thing nobody talks about. The bloodstained things, the private things, the things that tell you everything about the people who own them. If you know how to read the stains, you'll know how to read them by the end of tonight. I make these history stories, and I honestly never know if the laundry episodes are going to work, because on paper it sounds like a woman washing things. That's it. But here's what I've found. The domestic work, the invisible work, the work that kept Victorian England from drowning in its own filth. That's where the real history lives. Not in the parliaments, not in the palaces, in the women standing at stone sinks at 5 in the morning with their hands in water hot enough to cook an egg, getting blood out of a duke's pillowcase. It's darker than you think, more dangerous than you think, and stranger than you think. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your hands are already in the water before you're fully awake. That's the thing about this kind of work. It doesn't wait for you to catch up. By the time your mind has registered that you exist, that you are a person, that you have a name and a body and a life somewhere outside of this room, your hands are already doing what they've been doing for 3 months. Moving through the water, finding the linen, working. The water is hot, not scalding, not yet. The really hot stuff comes later. Right now it's the temperature of a fever, the kind that makes you think you're burning from the inside while the air around you is still cold. And the air is cold. It's November. Or you think it's November. You've lost a little track. The weeks blur together in a laundry. There's no seasons, really. There's just whether it's a drying day or not. Today it doesn't smell like a drying day. You can tell from the quality of the grey light coming through the high windows. Thin and flat and resigned. That's a fog light. That's a day when the sheets will go out and come back in smelling of coal smoke and damp and disappointment. But that's a problem for later. Right now, the water. You're standing at the 3rd stone sink from the left in the soaking room of Hartley's Commercial Laundry, 14 Grindle Street, Bermondsey, London. You've been standing at this sink since 4:45 this morning. It is now. You glance at the clock on the far wall, the big one that Mrs. Hartley put there specifically so there are no excuses about not knowing the time. It is now 5 past 5. 40 minutes of work and your hands already feel like they belong to someone much older than 15. Your name is Agnes Finch. You're 15 years old. You've been in London for 3 months and 2 weeks, and you came here from a village called Chattersley Corbett in Worcestershire, which is a beautiful name for a place and a terrible place to be if you need to earn money. You arrived with one dress, one change of underlinen, a letter of introduction from the vicar's wife, and the firm conviction that London would be frightening but temporary. You would work for 2 years, save what you could, send some home to your mother, and return having seen the world. That was 3 months ago. You're still working on the frightening part. Let's talk about the water first. Because water is everything in a laundry, and the water in a Victorian laundry is not the water you're imagining. It is not clean. Not in the way modern water is clean, running clear and tasteless from a tap. London's water in 1872 comes from the Thames, which is also London's primary drain. The water companies filter it, treat it with various things, pump it through pipes that are themselves in various states of decay. By the time it gets to Grindle Street, it's brown, not dark brown, a pale, uncertain brown like weak tea, and it smells of something mineral and damp. This is the water you wash linen in. You wash linen in it, and the linen comes out clean, relatively speaking, cleaner than it went in, cleaner than most things in London, which sets a low bar, but still. The trick is not the water. The trick is what you add to the water. Soda. Washing soda. Sodium carbonate. In quantities that would make your eyes water if you didn't already have eyes accustomed to chemical-laden steam. You scoop it from a sack near the boiler, grey-white crystals that catch the light like frost. It dissolves in the hot water with a faint fizzing sound and leaves the surface of the water slightly slick, slightly alkaline. It feels strange against your skin. Not painful, not yet. Just different from ordinary water, like the water is trying to dissolve you back. Lye comes later. Lye is for the heavy work. Lye is sodium hydroxide, which is a polite way of saying that it is a chemical that will strip the stain out of almost anything, including, if you're not careful, the top layer of your skin. The older women's hands tell this story. Every laundress in this building over 30 has hands that look like they've been made from a different material than hands. Not just rough. Rough is normal. Rough is callous. Rough is working hands. These hands are corrugated. The skin has been stripped so many times and healed so many times that it's become something else, something thicker. The knuckles are dark. The creases catch the lye and hold it, and the skin there will never fully recover. You look at Mrs. Hartley's hand sometimes when she's not looking. Mrs. Hartley is 63. She has been in the laundry trade since she was 9 years old. She has hands like leather bark. You look at your own hands, pink and raw and already cracking at the knuckles, and you calculate the arithmetic. You try not to calculate the arithmetic. The linen comes in every morning, by cart mostly. The delivery carts start arriving at 4 in the morning. Before you arrive even, before anyone except old Florrie who sleeps in the back and keeps the fires going overnight. You can hear them sometimes from Grinley Row where you rent a room with 2 other girls, the rumble of cartwheels on cobblestones at 3 in the morning, the muffled thump of bundles being unloaded. By the time you arrive, the receiving room is stacked. This is the first thing you do every morning. Before the water, before the chemicals, before any of it, you go to the receiving room and you sort. Sorting sounds simple. It is not simple. It is, in fact, a skill that takes months to learn properly, and Agnes, you, have been learning it for 3 months. which means you're still being corrected every other day by Mrs. Dempsey, who runs the sorting room and whose primary mode of communication is a disappointed silence followed by a demonstration of how it should be done. Here is what you're looking for when you sort. First, household. Every bundle arrives tied in canvas with a ticket attached, telling you whose linen it is. You know these households now, or the shorthand of them. Number 1 is Pemberton Square. That's a baronet's household. Lot of formal dining, heavy tablecloths, white everything. The kind of household that irons its napkins to a specific fold and will notice if they come back slightly different. Number 2 is the hospital account. St. Bartholomew's sends a cart twice a week, and it is the heaviest account in the building, both in volume and in what the linen contains. The hospital linen gets treated differently. Everything does, eventually, but hospital linen gets its own tubs and its own protocols and a little prayer from Mrs. Dempsey whenever it arrives. Number 7 is the theatre account. Costume linen mostly. Paint and grease and sweat and the occasional blood from an enthusiastic stage combat. Not your usual blood. Theatrical blood. Corn syrup and food colouring, some of it. Real blood too, sometimes, from the accidents that happen when people rehearse with actual swords. The difference between theatrical blood and real blood is a thing you know now. You didn't know it 3 months ago. Second, fabric, cotton, linen, wool, silk. You do not mix these. You do not put silk into hot water. You do not put wool into hot water. Hot water is for cotton and linen, the tough things, the boil-it-hard things, the things that can take punishment. Silk and wool get cold water and the most delicate of the available soaps and hands, gentle enough to handle them without stretching. New girls ruin silk. It's almost a rite of passage. You ruined a silk petticoat on your 2nd week. Mrs. Pemberton's, as luck would have it. And the story of that ruined petticoat has followed you around the building for 3 months. Mrs. Dempsey references it when she wants to make a point. You will not ruin silk again. Third, soil type. And here is where it gets interesting. Here is where a laundry stops being just a place where women wash things and starts being something more like a detective's office. An archive of private disasters. You look at a piece of linen and you read it. That's the only word for what you do. You read it. The stain tells you what happened. The stain tells you how long ago it happened. The stain tells you how hard the next hour of your life is going to be. Mud, brownish, uneven, easy, soak, scrub, done. Candle wax, waxy and translucent, harder. You need heat, specific heat, applied in a specific way. Food, 100 variations. Red wine is its own category, treated with cold water first because hot water sets it. Gravy, egg, butter and grease, sauce. Each one a different approach, a different combination of soda and soap and temperature and elbow. Sweat. You would think sweat is simple. It is not simple. Sweat over years becomes part of the fabric. Old sweat stains, particularly in the underarms and the collar, turn a particular shade of yellow-brown that resists almost everything. You can scrub until your arms give out. The stain retreats but does not entirely leave. This is a truth about bodies that the Victorians find very uncomfortable. And then, blood. Blood is a category of its own. Blood is, if you will forgive the observation, very common in a Victorian laundry. More common than most people think about, because most people don't think about where blood comes from in the context of a household. They don't think about it because thinking about it means thinking about the private, the bodily, the real. But you think about it now. You think about it every day. A small blood stain on a pillowcase. Someone had a nosebleed in the night. or a cut lip, or bit their cheek in their sleep. Not concerning. Cold water, a little salt, hydrogen peroxide if Mrs. Dempsey allows it, a larger blood stain on bed linen, regular, monthly. That's a woman's linen. That's private. That goes without comment into a specific tub, treated with specific things, and the women who sort it don't remark on it, because remarking on it isn't done. You learn this on your first week. Some things are simply there, and handled, and not spoken about. Blood on a tablecloth, with corresponding stains that suggest overturned wine and perhaps a broken plate. That's a dinner party gone wrong. Argument maybe, or an accident, or a dropped carving knife. Blood soaked through the centre of a sheet, in a pattern that spreads outward like a dark flower. That's childbirth. That's a baby being born. You've learned to identify the shape of a birth stain. It has a particular quality, a particular weight. The linen is often heavy with it, still damp sometimes when it arrives, smelling of iron and something deeper. When childbirth linen comes in, no one says anything. The older women work faster, and sometimes, not often, but sometimes, you get the other kind. The kind where the pattern is wrong, where the blood is in a place that doesn't make ordinary sense, where the quantity is too much, or the distribution is too specific, or there's something about the arrangement of the stain that makes the back of your neck prickle. This morning there's a bundle from an address you don't recognise. No ticket. Just the address written in a hurry on a piece of paper tucked into the knot. 4 Carlisle Mews, Chelsea. And the linen inside is soaked through. Not dripped, not stained. Soaked. Mrs. Dempsey picks it up, looks at it for 3 seconds, sets it down. That tub, she says, pointing to the one furthest from the door. Cold water first. Say nothing. You say nothing, but you think about it all morning. Let me tell you about the building. Hartley's commercial laundry is not a beautiful building. It was never designed to be. It was designed to be functional, and it achieves that ambition completely and without any concession to aesthetics. It is 3 stories tall, brick, built in 1843 on the site of what used to be a tannery, which is fitting because tanneries and laundries have something in common. They both transform something unpleasant into something acceptable, and both processes smell terrible. The ground floor is the washing floor. This is where you work. Stone sinks, 24 of them, running in rows down the length of the room. Each sink has a wooden board tilted at an angle. The scrubbing board, ridged and unyielding, designed to be scrubbed against until the stain is gone or your knuckles are. Above the sinks, high on the walls, the windows are always slightly open because without ventilation the steam would be unbearable. It's still nearly unbearable with ventilation. In winter the cold air comes through the windows and the hot air rises from the water, and you exist in this strange vertical gradient. Your feet cold from the stone floor, your face hot from the steam, your hands in between. At the far end of the washing floor, the coppers. 3 large copper boilers, each one big enough to boil your whole body if you slipped and fell in. They are filled with water and heating constantly. The sound of the coppers is the bass note of the building, a deep, rolling boil that you feel in your chest as much as here. Water is ladled from them into the sinks in buckets carried by the youngest girls, the boiler runners, who do nothing all day but walk between the coppers and the sinks with heavy buckets, and are consequently either very strong or completely destroyed by the end of the day. You were a boiler runner for your first 3 weeks. Your shoulders have never entirely recovered. The second floor is the mangling and drying room. The mangle is the centerpiece of this floor, and it deserves its own paragraph. The mangle is a machine roughly the size of a cart, iron-framed, with two enormous wooden rollers that turn toward each other. Wet linen goes in one side, between the rollers, and comes out the other side pressed flat and considerably less wet. The water is squeezed out and drains away in channels cut into the stone floor. Operating the mangle requires 2 women, minimum. One to feed the linen in, one to receive it on the other side. The rollers are driven by a handle cranked by a 3rd woman, or sometimes by a horse walking in a circle in the yard, connected to the mechanism by a series of chains and gears that make a sound like a very large, very unhappy clock. The mangle will crush your hand. This is not a metaphor. This is information. If your hand goes into the mangle, the rollers will close on it, and the result will be what you expect. It has happened 3 times at Hartley's in the last 10 years. Mrs. Dempsey told you this on your first day, not as a warning exactly, more as a statement of fact. This is a machine that can hurt you. Be aware of it. You are very aware of it. The 3rd floor is the ironing room and the drying racks. 20 women with flat irons heated on a long, central range, pressing and folding and wrapping and labelling. This is the quietest floor in terms of steam and chemical smell, but it is the hottest. The irons have to be kept at a precise temperature, hot enough to press the linen flat, not so hot as to scorch it. You test the temperature with the back of your hand, held close, but not touching. You feel the heat rise off the iron and judge it. You learn this temperature like you learn other physical facts, through your body, over time, through small burn scars. The ironing women have burn scars up and down their forearms, fine, thin lines, like a kind of writing. On your left wrist, a small, pale circle, where you touched an iron by accident on your 4th day in the building. You're learning the language. It is 6:30 in the morning. Your body knows what 6:30 means. The hard work starts now. The soaking has been happening since you arrived. Linen lying in cold water, the stains loosening, the blood softening, the fabric relaxing its grip on whatever has happened to it. Now comes the scrubbing. This is what people don't understand about Victorian laundry work. It is physical. Seriously, genuinely, break your body physical. More physical than most things that men get credit for. More physical than many of the jobs that come with a salary and a title. You pick up the first piece from the soaking tub. It's heavy. Wet linen is much heavier than dry linen. You'd be surprised, unless you've lifted it, and then you'd never be surprised again. A single soaked sheet weighs enough that you have to use both hands and brace your hips against the sink to pull it out. The water streams off it, cooling your already cold feet through the gaps in your boots. You lay it over the scrubbing board. You take a bar of soap, hard, yellow, smelling of tallow and lye, and something chemical underneath. You work it along the stained area, coating the linen, feeling the soap resist and then give, then the brush, horsehair bristles stiff as wire, both hands firm pressure, back and forth along the grain of the fabric. The sound is rhythmic, scrape and hiss, scrape and hiss. The water on the board goes grey, then slightly pink as the blood dissolves. You don't look at the colour of the water, you look at the stain. You look at whether the stain is lifting, whether the fibres of the linen are releasing what they've absorbed. Sometimes it happens quickly. Sometimes the stain is stubborn. It has dried. It has sat for days before being sent. It has had time to bond with the fabric at a molecular level. Those stains you scrub until your arms shake, and then you scrub more. The woman next to you is Nell. She's been here 8 years. She's 22. She scrubs without seeming to think about it, her hands moving on autopilot while her eyes go somewhere else. Somewhere above the sink. Somewhere that isn't here. She doesn't talk much, Nell. Not because the rules say not to talk. She just doesn't. She's one of those women who seem to have made a deal with silence. On your other side is Kitty. Kitty is 16 and she talks constantly in a low, fierce whisper that Mrs. Dempsey occasionally notices and threatens from across the room. Kitty is from Hackney. She's never been outside London in her life. She finds your accent charming and says so at least twice a day, which always sounds slightly like an insult even when it isn't. "That Chelsea bundle," Kitty says, not looking at you, her brush moving fast and small against a cuff. "Say nothing," you say. Kitty's brush pauses for 1/2 second. "You saw?" "I saw Mrs. Dempsey put it in the far tub." "Yes." "Something happened there." Kitty's voice drops even lower. "In Chelsea? That kind of linen." "We don't know what kind of linen. I've been here 3 years, Agnes. I know what kind of linen." You scrub in silence for a moment. The pink water runs off the borders into the drain channel. "We don't talk about it," you say. "No," Kitty agrees. "We don't." She goes back to the cuff. You go back to the sheet. The blood comes out slowly, reluctantly, the way all secrets eventually have to be given up. By 8 o'clock you've forgotten you were ever anything but a pair of arms attached to a scrubbing brush. This is the mercy of physical work. It eventually colonizes your mind. The thinking stops. The worrying about the bundle from Chelsea, about the letter you should write to your mother and haven't, about the cough that has been developing in your chest for the past 3 weeks. All of it retreats to somewhere quiet, somewhere behind the immediate facts of the brush in your hands and the resistance of the linen and the temperature of the water. You just work. Let me tell you what the work feels like, because it is important that you know. Your hands have been in and out of hot water for 3 hours. The skin on your fingers is softened and swollen, slightly pale, and where you've been gripping the brush handle, the web between your thumb and forefinger is worn to a deep pink that would be a proper blister by midday. Your back, and this is the chronic thing, the thing that every laundress develops, your lower back is beginning to speak to you, not sharp pain, not yet, a dull, insistent pressure, the beginning of the sentence that your back will continue for the rest of the day, growing louder by afternoon, becoming by evening a kind of continuous notification from your body that this position, bent forward over a stone sink, reaching into deep water, pulling and lifting and carrying, is not a position that a human spine was designed for. Not long term, not every day. The older women move with a specific posture in the evenings, a slight cant forward, a stiffness in the straightening. They don't complain about it. It is simply part of what they are now. Your shoulders, which were still relatively normal when you arrived in August, have developed in ways you didn't expect. If you look in the small mirror in the room on Grindley Row, you can see that your shoulders are no longer the shoulders of a country girl who did moderate farm work. They are becoming laundry shoulders, rounded slightly forward, carrying the memory of every sheet they've pulled from every tub. In 10 years, if you're still here, and you won't be, you tell yourself, you will not be here in 10 years, your body will look like the body of a laundress the way a sailor's body looks like a sailor's. The work writes itself into you. Your hands today, already red, already slightly raw, the soap getting into the places where the skin has cracked overnight. Your fingernails, which you keep short because long nails and laundry work are incompatible, are stained slightly blue at the edges from the washing blue that went into the rinse tubs yesterday. Washing blue, a chemical additive that counteracts the yellowing of white fabric and makes it look whiter. It turns your hands blue. It turns your fingernails blue. It turns the water a strange iridescent shade that is almost beautiful actually if you catch it in the right light. In the right light, the rinse tubs look like something expensive, like blue glass. The light in the laundry is never quite the right light. At 9 o'clock, the hospital cart arrives. You hear it before you see it. The horse? They use the same horse every time. A brown cob with a calm disposition that suggests it has processed its feeling about its job and moved on, comes up the yard at a walk, and the cart behind it is loaded high with canvas bundles, each one tied with hospital cord, each one smelling even from the yard of what is inside. Hospital linen day. The receiving room fills up immediately. 3 of the older women go to deal with it. Nell is one of them, because she is trusted with hospital linen in ways that newer girls are not yet trusted, and she moves from her sink without being asked, and goes to the receiving room with the particular walk she uses when she's moving from autopilot to actually paying attention. You continue your scrubbing, but you can hear the sound of the bundles being opened, the quiet comments between the women sorting it. Hospital linen is different. Not just because of the volume, although the volume is significant. St. Bartholomew's sends, on a twice-weekly basis, enough linen to fill a small room. It's different because of what it contains. The ward sheets, the surgical linen, the things used in the operating theatres and the wards and the rooms where people die and are born. The operating theatre sends linen that is sometimes, often, very heavily soiled, blood in quantities that go beyond the domestic, blood that has been produced not by childbirth or accident, but by surgery, by a surgeon's blade, by the deliberate opening of a body to try to repair or remove something inside it. Victorian surgery. Let me make sure you understand what that means. Anaesthesia exists by the 1870s, chloroform, ether, both in use. But antiseptic practice is still relatively new. Joseph Lister published his work on antiseptic surgery in 1867, just 5 years before this morning. Before that, operating theatres were places where you went in with one problem, and often came out with that problem and an infection. The surgeons operated in their street clothes. Some of them were proud of the old stains on their coats, a badge of experience, a record of surgeries performed. The linen from the operating theatres tells this story. It tells it in blood that has dried to a dark red-brown, blood mixed sometimes with the specific chemical smell of chloroform, blood that has soaked through 3 or 4 layers of cotton because the procedure was long or complicated or both. When this linen arrives, the women who handle it work with an extra efficiency. Not panicked efficiency. Calm, methodical, experienced efficiency. The blood goes in cold water first. Always, always cold water first, because hot water sets blood permanently into fabric. This is the first rule of blood. Cold water first. You can always add heat later. But if you put blood into hot water, you have made a decision that the linen will carry a shadow of that stain for the rest of its existence. Nell comes back to her station after half an hour in the receiving room. She picks up her brush. She doesn't say anything about the hospital cart. You don't ask. There is a rule in this building that you learned on your first week. You do not ask what the linen has been through. This is not officially a rule. Mrs. Hartley has not written it on the board next to the one about keeping the water troughs clean and the one about the fire buckets. It is an unofficial rule, the kind that exists in any workplace where the work involves handling private things. You wash it, you clean it, you return it. What happened before it arrived here is not your concern, but you see it. Every day you see it. You develop a knowledge of human life that most people in this city don't have. The middle-class women who send their linen here, they send it specifically so they don't have to look at it. So they don't have to confront the body's insistence on being a body, on bleeding and sweating and giving birth and falling ill, and all the other things that bodies do regardless of how much money you have or how many servants you employ. They send it away. It comes to you. You clean it. You send it back, white and pressed and silent. But you have seen it. You know. Here is some of what you know. You know that the household on Pemberton Square, the baronet's house, the formal tablecloths, you know that someone in that house is very ill, has been ill for months. The linen comes back with the particular stains of sickness, the yellow of heavy sweat, the brown of dried material that you learn to identify without being able to put into words, the thin red threads of blood in cloth that has been coughed into. You wash these things and you return them and you say nothing. You know that the theatre account includes periodically a woman's corset that has been torn rather than unlaced. You know what this means, or you think you do. You wash it and you don't think about it and you move on to the next piece. You know that one of the houses on the hospital account, a doctor's residence, the card says, sends linen that sometimes includes cloth cut into strips, not torn, precisely cut. These are used for something medical, clearly. They come back with specific stains that you've come to recognize. The dark orange-brown of iodine, the yellow of some kind of salve, occasionally blood, sometimes the clear fluid of a wound drainage. The doctor's household. Someone there is doing medical work at home, and you know about the Chelsea bundle, which is in the far tub in cold water, and which Mrs. Dempsey has been approaching every 40 minutes to check on, and which no one is talking about. The 10 o'clock break is 5 minutes. In the summer, you sometimes take it in the yard, a strip of concrete behind the building, bounded by the coal store and the mangle wheel and a single plane tree that has somehow survived the proximity to the laundry's chemical output. In November, with fog pressing down on the city like a wet cloth, you take it standing in the corridor between the washing floor and the receiving room, eating the bread and scrape you brought from Grindley Row this morning. Your bread is slightly damp. It was in your coat pocket, which is always slightly damp in November, because your coat is not waterproof, and the walk from Grindley Row to Grindle Street involves navigating puddles that have been accumulating since October. The bread tastes of coat. You eat it anyway. You're hungry in a way that only serious physical work produces. Not the ordinary hollow hunger of having missed a meal, but a bone-level hunger, your body demanding fuel with a directness that normal existence doesn't generate. Standing next to you, also eating bread, is Mary Hawkins. Mrs. Hawkins, though nobody has seen a Mr. Hawkins and nobody asks. She is 41 years old, has been at Hartley's since she was 20, has fingers so permanently stained that they are slightly dark even when freshly washed, and knows more about laundry chemistry than anyone in the building, including Mrs. Hartley herself. Mrs. Hawkins is your mentor, though she would not use that word. She would say she's showing you how not to ruin things. The net effect is the same. She looks at your hands. You're wringing instead of pressing, she says. I know. Your hands ache in the way that suggests she's correct. I forget. Wringing puts the stress wrong. You'll pull the fibres apart if you wring instead of pressing. With blood-stained linen especially. She chews. Press and roll, not wring. The stain comes out better and the fabric lasts longer. Press and roll. And change your water sooner. If the water's pink, it's full. Change it. You eat your bread in silence for a moment. Outside, through the corridor's small window, you can see the yard in the fog. The plane tree is barely visible. The fog is proper London fog. Not just mist, not just damp air. It has a physical quality, a yellowish grey, a smell of coal and river, and something you've come to think of simply as the city's own smell. The exhalation of 4 million people living on top of each other. Mrs. Hawkins, you say? The Chelsea bundle, the bread, the chewing. A pause just long enough to mean something. No, she says. I'm not asking what it is. I know what it is. I mean, what do we wash it, she says. We return it. We say nothing. That's all. That's the whole of it. But, Agnes, she turns to look at you. She has eyes the colour of rain. Not grey exactly. Something between grey and green, the colour of November. We wash it, we return it. We say nothing, say it back to me. We wash it, we return it, we say nothing. Good. She goes back to her bread. There are things in this work that you carry, and there are things in this work that you set down. The linen is not yours. What happened to make it what it is? Not yours. You treat it with care. You clean it properly. You return it. What happens after that is not your business. She says this the way someone says a thing they have had to tell themselves many times. Did you always believe that? You ask, the longest pause yet. No, she says. But I believe it now. 5 minutes are up. Back to the water. The morning passes, not gently, not with any of the soft quality that the word passes sometimes implies. The morning is a physical thing that happens to you, an extended negotiation between your body and the work. Your lower back stops suggesting and starts insisting. The blister on the web of your thumb breaks, not painfully, just a sudden wetness that you feel but don't look at, dipping your hand back into the soak water before you can think about it. The steam thickens as the coppers reach full heat, and for a while, around 11, you cannot see to the far end of the washing floor at all. You exist in a small, humid world bounded by the neighbouring sinks, by Nell's silent arms to your left and Kitty's constant murmured narration to your right, by the sounds of work, and by the smell. Let me try to describe the smell of a Victorian laundry at full operation. This will be difficult because smell is the sense most resistant to description, the most insistently physical. You cannot read about a smell and have it arrive in your nose, but try. The top layer, soap, yellow laundry soap, tallow and alkali, a smell that is sharp and clean in a very industrial way. Nothing like the soaps in the chemist's window on Bermondsey High Street. Those are rose and lavender and cucumber. This soap smells like a process, like the removal of things, like erasure. Underneath that, soda. Washing soda has a specific smell, slightly sour, slightly chemical, the smell of something that will accept anything in solution and work on it until it gives up. Underneath that, steam. Not water steam exactly. Steam that has risen off laundry, carrying with it the dissolved residue of everything being washed. A complex and intimate smell. You breathe in someone's bed linen, and you breathe in very faintly their sleep, their bodies, their night. underneath all of that, the building, brick and stone and old wood, decades of laundry absorbed into the walls. The building itself has been washed in a sense. Decades of steam have penetrated the brickwork, and the building smells of all the laundry that has ever been done here. And underneath all of that, on this particular morning, blood. Not strongly, not alarmingly, just a thread of it, running through the laundry smell, iron and meat and something very slightly sweet. The hospital cart, the Chelsea bundle in its far tub, the ordinary monthly linen in its ordinary tubs. Blood is very common here. You have stopped noticing it, mostly. That fact itself is worth noticing. At noon, the cart from Pemberton Square comes to collect. Collection is a ritual. The finished linen, washed, pressed, folded, wrapped in the clean cloth used for delivery, tied with the household's own cord, is loaded back onto carts and returned. Every household has its own system, its own preferences. Pemberton Square is very particular about the fold of its napkins. The household on Baker Street wants everything wrapped in blue paper. The hospital sends its own orderlies to collect. You're assigned to help with the Pemberton Square cart, which means carrying bundles from the finished rack down to the yard and loading them under the supervision of the carter, a large silent man named Tom, who only communicates in grunts and nods, but who grunts and nods expressively enough to constitute a full language. Carrying finished laundry is different from carrying wet laundry. Wet laundry is heavy and cold and dripping. Finished laundry is light and warm from the ironing, and it smells different, of starch and heat, of something blank and clean and ready to be used again. It smells like possibility, like something that has been through the worst and come out the other side. You carry bundle after bundle down the 3 flights of stairs to the yard. Your thighs ache from the stairs. There are 54 stairs in this building, and you count them every time because counting them is the only thing that makes them finite. 43, 44, 45. The fog has thickened. The yard is a small grey square. Tom the carter nods at where to put the bundles, and you put them there and go back up. On the second trip down, passing the first floor landing, you catch a sound from behind the closed door of Mrs. Hartley's office. A voice, not Mrs. Hartley's voice, a man's voice, low and precise. And Mrs. Hartley's voice in response, also low, somewhat careful. You don't stop. You don't slow down. You carry your bundle to the yard and load it and go back up and don't think about it. 43, 44, 45. A man in Mrs. Hartley's office on the morning the Chelsea bundle arrived. You press and roll instead of ringing. You change the water when it's pink. You say nothing. The afternoon is different from the morning. In the morning the work is getting into gear. Bodies stiff from the night. The chemicals and the water and the heat having not yet reached their peak. The rhythm of work not yet fully established. The morning has a rough quality, an effortful quality. You're fighting the work rather than flowing with it. The afternoon, when you've been at it for 7 hours, when your body has given up arguing and simply joined the operation, when your hands move with a terrible automatic efficiency, the afternoon has a different quality entirely. It's almost hypnotic. Scrape and hiss. Scrape and hiss. The brush on the board, the water going grey and then pink and then grey again as you change it. The movement of your arms back and forth that has become as natural as breathing. Around 2 o'clock, Kitty starts humming. She's not supposed to. Mrs. Dempsey is on the floor, moving between stations, and humming falls into the same category as talking. which falls into the category of things that distract you from the work and therefore waste time, and time is money, and Mrs. Hartley's money is not to be wasted. But Kitty hums anyway, very quietly, just enough for you to hear if you're close. A music hall song. Something cheerful. The kind of thing that assumes the world is fundamentally capable of being cheerful, which is either optimism or delusion, and in this building at this time of day feels like both. You find yourself trying to identify the tune. This takes you out of your own head for a few minutes. Your hands keep working. Your back keeps aching. But some part of you that has been locked down since 5 a.m. unclenches, very slightly. Kitty's voice barely above her breath. You ever wonder about them? The people whose things we wash. You consider the rules. You consider Mrs. Hawkins's words. You consider the Chelsea bundle. Sometimes you say, I wonder about them all the time. Pemberton Square. I figure it's a man with gout because of the particular footwear I keep seeing in the households. You shouldn't be able to see the household's footwear, Kitty. Well, I see it anyway. And a woman who wears real French perfume. You can smell it in the linen. But something's wrong with the marriage because the bed linen comes in 2 separate bundles, hers and his. And they're always different soil days. They're not sleeping in the same bed. This is more than you need to know about the Pemberton Square household. What about number 7, you say, despite yourself? The theatre. Kitty grins. You can hear the grin in her voice without looking. That's the interesting one. 2 weeks ago there was a velvet cape. Beautiful. Deep green. Lovely quality. But the blood on it wasn't stage blood. Stage blood has that sweet smell, yes? This was real. And the cut in the velvet. You could see the cut before I had to work on it. It was a long, thin cut, like a blade, like someone had sliced the shoulder of the cape while it was being worn. An accident, you say? Maybe. The brush, the water, the steam pressing down from the coppers. What about the Chelsea bundle, Kitty says, very quietly. You keep scrubbing. You don't answer. You saw it. I saw it too for half a second when Mrs. Dempsey was sorting. Agnes. There was no address label, just the address in pencil on a bit of paper. We don't talk about it. I know we don't talk about it. Kitty's voice has lost its lightness. But I'm going to be thinking about it all night regardless, and I'd rather think about it with some company. The brush, the water, the steam. It was a sheet, you say, quietly, barely above breath. A single sheet. High-quality cotton, Egyptian, I think. And the blood was... You stop. Centre of the sheet, Kitty says, spreading outward, but the pattern was wrong. It wasn't a birth stain, you say. No. Both of you work in silence for a long moment. Someone was hurt, you say finally. It is the smallest version of what you think, the most neutral, most deniable version. Yes, Kitty says, or they were ill. People with certain illnesses. Agnes, you scrub. In that amount, with that distribution. You scrub. We wash it, you say. We return it. We say nothing. Kitty doesn't answer for a long time. Then, Mrs. Hawkins taught you that? Yes. She's right, Kitty says. And I know she's right. A pause. I still hate that she's right. The brushes move. The water changes. Above your heads, the foggy November afternoon makes the high windows glow a dim and uncertain grey. At 2:30, something happens that has nothing to do with the Chelsea bundle and everything to do with the mangle. The mangle is being operated on the 2nd floor. You can hear it through the ceiling. The grinding sound of the rollers, the occasional thump of a particularly heavy piece going through, the rhythmic mechanical breathing of the equipment, and then a sound that is not mechanical. A high, short sound. Not a scream exactly, more like a word interrupted, and then silence where the mangle sound should be, and then voices rising. Mrs. Dempsey is at the door of the washing floor and moving toward the stairs before you even fully register what you've heard. You look at Nell. Nell sets down her brush with a care that suggests she knows exactly what the sound meant and follows Mrs. Dempsey. You and Kitty look at each other. "Stay here," says the woman at the end sink, Margaret, one of the seniors, 50 if she's a day, who only speaks when there is something that needs to be said. All of you stay here. Keep working. You keep working. Above you, more voices. Something being moved. Someone saying firmly and repeatedly, "Give her air. Step back." Your hands go through the motions. Scrub, rinse, press and roll. Change the water. 5 minutes pass. 10. Mrs. Dempsey comes back down. "Frances Tully has had a turn," she says. Her voice is absolutely steady. The voice of someone who has made steadiness a professional attribute. She's resting. The mangle is stopped for now. "Agnes, I need you upstairs." You go upstairs. The mangle floor is warm and strange. The ironing fire is making it significantly hotter than below, and without the mangle turning, the usual rhythmic noise is absent, making the room feel hollow. The ironing women have stopped. They stand at their stations with their irons set back on the range, and they're all looking at the corner nearest the window where Frances Tully, 28 years old, 4 years at Hartley's, is sitting on a stool with her head tilted back against the wall. She's very pale. Her eyes are open but not focused. Her breathing is fast and shallow, the way breathing goes when a body has been asked too much and is currently discussing next steps. Beside her, Mrs. Hawkins has a wet cloth and is applying it to Frances's forehead. She looks up when you come in. "Get the bucket from the storeroom, the tin one, and tell Hetty at the ironing range to open both the top windows, the casements, not the fixed ones." You do these things with the speed that comes from being told clearly what to do and having a useful task to perform. When you return with the bucket, Mrs. Hawkins takes it without looking at you and begins ladling cold water over the cloth, pressing it to Frances's face to her neck. "She fainted, you ask? Overheated?" Mrs. Hawkins's voice is matter-of-fact, clinical. The steam from the mangle box, combined with the ironing range, combined with the fact that she has not been eating enough. Again, she says this last word with a flatness that contains an entire argument that has already been had. Frances Tully opens her eyes properly, focuses, finds Mrs. Hawkins's face. "Sorry," she says. Her voice is thin and dry. "Don't apologise," Mrs. Hawkins says. "Drink this." She hands her a cup of water from somewhere. Frances drinks. Her hands are shaking. You stand near the window, which Hetty has now opened, admitting a rectangle of foggy November air that is cold enough to be genuinely welcome. You watch the cold air move into the room, visibly. Fog doesn't just sit outside, it creeps, it comes through gaps, it fills spaces. And think about the heat in this room, this floor. The ironing range full lit, 20 irons, all day, every day. And the women ironing, standing over the heat, breathing the air from the range, which is coal smoke and chemical starch and the hot metal smell of the irons themselves. And the women on the floor below, in the steam from the coppers, breathing that all day. And the women in the receiving room, breathing the smell of arriving linen, which is the smell of households and hospitals and whatever they contain. 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, for years. Frances Tully at 28, with 4 years in this building, has lungs that make a sound when she breathes. Not a wheeze exactly, more of a roughness, a texture to the breath that shouldn't be there. Mrs. Hawkins has the same roughness, more developed. When it's quiet in the afternoon, you can sometimes hear it in the space between brush strokes. The heat, you say, not to anyone in particular, just to acknowledge that you see what you see. Mrs. Hawkins looks at you. Frances looks at you. The heat is part of the work, Mrs. Hawkins says. You manage it. You drink water. You eat properly. You don't push yourself past your signal. What's the signal? The moment before what just happened to Frances. She hands Frances another cup. The moment when your vision goes slightly bright at the edges and the room seems to tilt. That's the signal. You sit down. You get cold water on your neck. You don't try to finish the last 2 pieces before you stop. You stop. Frances, drinking, nods with the dignity of someone who's trying to be less embarrassed than she currently feels. I thought I could get the last 2 through before the bell, she says. Yes, Mrs. Hawkins says. You always think that. She looks up at you again. This is a thing you will learn, Agnes. The work will always want more than you can give it. There will always be 2 more pieces before the bell. The question is whether you know when to stop. She stands efficiently. Frances will be fine. Hetty, keep the window. Everyone back to work in 5 minutes. You walk back toward the stairs. Agnes. You turn. Mrs. Hawkins is watching you from across the mangle floor, the wet cloth in her hand. You're doing well, she says. Don't let the building break you before you've learned everything it knows. She turns away before you can answer. You stand for one moment in the cold air from the window, feeling the fog on your face, hearing below you the muffled sounds of the washing floor returning to its rhythm, and above you the distant city going about its afternoon business entirely unaware of this room, these women, this work. Then you go back downstairs. The afternoon deepens. The fog outside the high windows shifts from grey to a darker grey, which is the November version of the sun moving toward the west. You wouldn't know it from the light. The light barely changes in a London fog. It simply gets slightly less of whatever it was until it is gone. Inside the washing floor, the coppers have reached their full operating temperature, and the steam is constant now, thick and close, turning everything beyond 10 feet into a soft-edged suggestion of itself. You work in your small world of the sink and the board and the brush, and the world outside that small world exists only as sound and vapour. Your hands have gone past the acute stage of pain and into a numb efficiency that is almost comfortable. The blister on your thumb has hardened slightly around the break, the wet skin drying as you work. Your back speaks to you in a continuous low voice that you have learned to hear without responding to. The cough, which has been building in your chest all day, announces itself with a small tightening every 10 minutes or so, a reminder. You swallow against it, press it down, keep working. The hospital linen is fully processed now. 58 pieces, sheets, pillowcases, operating theatre cloth, bandage rolls that have to be re-washed and re-rolled, all through the soak tubs, all scrubbed, all run through the boiling copper for the required time, all pressed through the mangle, all taken up to the drying racks or the ironing floor. The operating theatre cloth is the hard work of the hospital account. Linen used in surgery has been through things that ordinary household linen hasn't. It has been soaked through, multiple times, with blood that has dried and then been wet again and dried again, with the specific residues of surgical procedures with everything that a body contains when it is opened. The women who work the boiling copper handle this linen with long wooden paddles. You lift it with the paddle, you push it down into the boiling water, you keep it moving, because it has to reach temperature everywhere, every fibre, or the cleaning and the sterilisation are incomplete. The water in the copper, when it's processing surgical linen, turns a particular colour, a brownish orange, and it smells of iron and the particular sharp chemical smell of whatever the surgical team used to clean the wound. You have turned this linen with the wooden paddle today, and when you lift the paddle afterward, the wood is slightly stained with the colour the water has become. You use that paddle for nothing else. Each copper has its own paddles, each with their designated purpose, hung on hooks above the copper, and the hooks are labelled with what goes in that copper and only that copper. Mrs. Hartley is firm about this. Mrs. Hartley is firm about many things, and most of them make sense when you understand why. And understanding why is part of what it means to learn this work properly rather than just do it. At 3 o'clock, Mrs. Dempsey approaches the far tub. You're not watching, you're working. But your peripheral awareness of the far tub, which has been there all day, a quiet fact at the edge of your consciousness, tells you that Mrs. Dempsey is there, is looking, is assessing. You don't turn around. Kitty, to your right, becomes very focused on her work in a way that is itself a kind of watching. Mrs. Dempsey, after a minute, begins the Chelsea linen. She works alone. She has pushed the far tub away from the row slightly, creating a small private workspace. You hear the sound of water being changed, the drain opening, the tub emptying, new water beginning to fill from the ladle bucket. The cold water protocol is being continued, the cold water that is pulling the blood out of the fabric gently, without setting it, coaxing rather than forcing. Then a sound that is different, a small careful movement, fabric being lifted and assessed. Then silence. Mrs. Dempsey's working silence, which is different from the silence of someone who has nothing to say. It is a focused silence. You work, scrape and hiss, scrape and hiss. After a long time, 20 minutes perhaps, you hear the sound of the linen going back into fresh water, the drain opening and closing, the protocol continuing. Then Mrs. Dempsey's footsteps moving away toward the receiving room, and then the sound of her voice, low from the receiving room, speaking to someone you cannot see, a man's voice in response, the same voice from Mrs. Hartley's office this afternoon, the low, precise one. You scrub your linen very hard for a moment. Then Nell on your left, without looking at you, without stopping her own brush. Keep your head down. You keep your head down. The voices in the receiving room continue for perhaps 2 minutes. Then footsteps going toward the front of the building. Not the yard entrance, the street entrance, the one clients use. The sound of the street door opening and closing. Silence. Mrs. Dempsey comes back onto the washing floor. She surveys the room in one slow pass, her gaze moving from sink to sink with the efficiency of someone checking that everything is as it should be. Her gaze reaches you, passes over you. "Agnes," she says, "come here." You set down your brush. You go to her. She leads you to the far tub without speaking. She points at the linen, half submerged in the water. "I want you to finish this," she says. You look at her. Cold water, minimum 2 more changes before any soap. When the water runs clear, then soap, then cold rinse, then very gentle. No scrubbing board, hands only. She looks at you steadily. "Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am. It's fine Egyptian cotton, worth more than you earn in a month. treat it accordingly. Yes, ma'am. She looks at you for one moment longer, with an expression that might be assessing or might be something more than that, something more like one person acknowledging another. Some things come through this room, she says, and you do the work and it goes back out and the world continues. Her pause. That's the job. That's the whole of it. Yes, ma'am, you say. She nods once as walks away. You stand at the far tub, alone in your small pocket of privacy, and you look at the linen in the cold water. A sheet. Egyptian cotton. High quality. Even in this state, even in what has been done to it, you can feel the quality in the weight and the weave. This came from a bed in a house in Chelsea on a day that was not ordinary. You put your hands into the cold water. Your hands, red and slightly raw, and stained faintly blue at the fingernails, go into the cold water around this sheet. The cold is immediate and clarifying. It makes you very present. You begin to work. You do not work on the cold water with a brush. You work with your hands gently, the way Mrs. Dempsey specified, pressing and rolling through the fabric, feeling the water moving through it, feeling the resistance where the stain is heaviest, the centre of the sheet, the dark flower that Kitty named. You work outward from the centre, carefully, the way you have been taught, not forcing, not scrubbing, just moving the water through the fabric, persuading it. The water in the tub, which was already pale pink from the previous soak, goes darker as you work. You drain it. You refill it from the cold bucket. You work again. The second change of water comes out lighter. You work with a calm that surprises you. Your hands know what they're doing, and your mind, which has been noisy all day with the sounds and the smells and the question of this tub, goes quiet. There is just the sheet and the cold water and the slow, patient work of returning something to what it was before. This is what you do. You return things. That is, in the end, the job. You work for half an hour, just the far tub, just the sheet, changing the water 4 times. By the 4th change, the water runs almost clear. Then the soap, then the cold rinse, twice. Then you lift the sheet out of the tub. It's heavy, heavy with cold water. Both hands brace against the rim, and you carry it dripping up the stairs to the drying rack. The drying rack is a series of wooden rails suspended from the ceiling on ropes and pulleys. You pull the rails down to your height, lay the sheet across them, and winch them back up to near the ceiling where the air is warmest. The sheet hangs there, white and damp and clean. It is just a sheet now. You stand for a moment looking at it. Then you go back downstairs. By 5 o'clock the light outside has given up entirely. This is November in London. Darkness arrives not gradually but as a decision, as if the city has reached a collective agreement that enough is enough and the day is over. The high windows, which have been showing you fog all day, now show you fog that is dark. The gas lamps on the washing floor are lit. They were lit at 3 actually, but now they are the only light, and the washing floor looks different by gaslight. More orange, more shadowed. The women at the sinks are silhouettes against the copper glow of the lamps, and the steam, lit from below, rises in golden columns toward the black ceiling. It would be beautiful in a painting. In a painting, a woman bent over a stone sink with a brush in her hand, and steam rising around her could be beautiful. The pre-Raphaelites would make something of it. Golden light. Suffering rendered noble. From inside it, it feels like the 10th hour of your body being used as a tool. The evening bell rings at 5:30. This is not the end of the day. The evening bell is the signal to begin clearing up, putting away the chemicals, emptying and rinsing the soak tubs, scrubbing the scrubbing boards, making sure the coppers are banked correctly, checking that the drying racks are properly loaded, preparing the receiving room for tomorrow morning's arrivals. Clear up takes an hour. You know this hour well. It is in some ways the hardest hour of the day, because your body has been at work since before 5 in the morning, and it now knows with the certainty that nothing can argue with, that it has given everything it has to give. And yet there is still this hour of work between you and the door. You clean your sink with methodical thoroughness, you rinse the board, you take your brushes to the brush trough, rinse them, hang them by their handles to dry. You carry the accumulated buckets of changed water to the drain channel and empty them. 4 or 5 buckets, heavy enough to make your shoulders protest, and rinse the buckets and stack them. Around you, the same work happening at every other station. 40 women, all doing the same things, all in various stages of the same exhaustion, all moving through the end-of-day routine with the slightly mechanical quality that comes from doing something so many times it no longer requires conscious direction. Kitty moving past you with a bucket. You finished it. Yes. How was it? Clean. I got it clean. Kitty nods. This is sufficient. She carries her bucket to the drain. You carry your last bucket to the drain and pour it out and watch the grey water disappear down the channel and run to wherever London's waste eventually goes, into the Thames eventually, into the river that flows through the city and then out to sea, carrying everything the city has produced and used and discarded, everything washed, everything returned, everything flowing away. At 6:30, the building empties. The women leave in groups, by neighbourhood, the way people naturally sort themselves when they have been doing the same hard work all day and need to get home. Those going north leave together, those going east, those going south toward Bermondsey and Woolworth, and the streets between the river and the Kent Road. You go south with Kitty and a woman named Dorothy, who doesn't say much but whose presence is reassuring in the way of a large steady thing. The street outside Hartley's is Grindle Street, which is the kind of street that the Victorians produced in great quantities in areas like Bermondsey, narrow, necessary, unadorned. It runs between the commercial road and the tannery district, and the smell of the tanneries is always present, has always been present, will always be present as long as you live in this part of London. Tanneries process leather, and the processing of leather involves things: urine, bark, animal fat in various states of decomposition, that produce a smell of spectacular intensity and great staying power. After a year in this neighbourhood, people say, you stop noticing the smell. It has been 3 months, and you still notice the smell. But after 10 hours in the laundry, the tannery smell is almost refreshing. It is cold and strong, and it is outside air, and outside air, however compromised, is better than the inside of the laundry at 5 in the evening. You breathe it in. The street is full of the end-of-day traffic. Grindle Street itself is a working street. The laundry, a cooperage, 2 small factories of some kind behind walls you've never seen over, a pub called the Cartwright's Arms that does its best business between 6 and 8 every evening. The workers from all these places are now in the street together, flowing southward, everyone going home or toward whatever version of home they've arranged in this city. The fog sits low and close. The gas lamps have been lit on the main roads, but Grindle Street has no gas lamps. It is too small, too unimportant, and the ratepayers here are not the kind who get gas lamps. You navigate by the glow from windows and the light that bleeds in from the larger streets at each end, and by the knowledge of where the road goes, which your feet know now even when your eyes are uncertain. Kitty walks fast, which is her natural speed. Dorothy walks with a measured heaviness, a woman who has learned to pace herself at every stage of the day. "Will you write to your mother tonight?" Kitty asks. "Probably not tonight." "You keep saying that." "I know." "Your mother writes to you," Kitty observes, not accusingly, just observing. "That envelope that came last week. I'll write this Sunday." "You say that about Sunday too." You say nothing. The fog closes around you as you turn into Bermondsey Lane. The main road, slightly wider, slightly better lit. The street vendor with the hot potato cart at the corner, doing his best business of the day as workers pass. The smell of the hot potato cart. This is one of the details of your London life that has become precious without you entirely noticing. A baked potato, 2p, with a scrape of butter if the man is feeling generous. Hot all the way through, held in both hands while you eat it, the heat moving through your palms. You have 2p. More accurately, you have the coins in your pocket that constitute the remainder of your week's wages after your rent and your food money, and you should not spend them on a potato, but your hands have been in cold water for the last part of the afternoon, and the idea of holding something hot. You buy the potato. Kitty, who also has 2p, buys one. Dorothy produces a 6p from somewhere, and buys one and receives a small piece of cheese as well, which she eats off the side of her potato with the air of someone who has negotiated this arrangement before. You walk and eat. The potato is floury and hot and slightly ashy from the bottom of the cart, and it is the best thing you've eaten since breakfast, which was stale bread in a coat pocket, which sets a low bar, but still. The fog moves around you in the lamplight. Other people, other workers, other bundles of coat and hat and tired face pass on both sides. Bermondsey in the evening. This part of London, south of the river, east of Lambeth, bounded by the tanneries to the east and the leather market to the north, is a working district in the truest sense. It has been a working district for centuries. The smell of the tanneries has been here for as long as London has had a south bank. Bermondsey leather, Bermondsey workers, the long streets of terraced housing that were built precisely to contain the workforce that keeps the industries running. There are no grand buildings here, no churches designed by Wren, no royal institutions. The buildings that line these streets are two-storey terraces, brick, mid-century, uniform in a way that speaks of purpose rather than beauty. Every house is inhabited fully by people who get up early and come home late and spend the interval doing work that the rest of the city needs done and doesn't much think about. The laundresses, the tanners, the market porters who work the leather market, the factory hands from the biscuit factory on Kemah Street whose hands smell permanently of biscuit, the women from the jam factory who come home stained red and purple in summer, the men from the vinegar works. Bermondsey processes things, takes in the raw material of the city and transforms it into what the city needs. This is your neighbourhood. 3 months ago, arriving here from Chaddesley Corbett with your bundle and your letter from the vicar's wife, you found it overwhelming. The noise, the smell, the density of people, the grey uniformity of the streets. Coming from a village where you knew every face and every face knew yours, the anonymity of these streets was itself a kind of shock. You could disappear here, vanish into the working mass, become one of the indistinguishable figures moving through the fog at 6:30 in the evening. Now, the same streets, the same fog, the same moving figures, and you are not frightened by the anonymity. You are almost comfortable in it. You know things. You know which stalls in the Bermondsey market sell genuine produce, and which ones are selling yesterday's at today's prices. You know the woman who runs the reading room on Webb Street and lets you sit by her fire on Sunday afternoons. You know the pub where the laundresses drink on Saturday evenings and which landlord will cut the beer with water and which one won't. You know the route home with your eyes closed. You have walked it in real darkness, actual darkness, when the fog is thick enough that even the lamp glow is swallowed, and your feet have known where to turn without your mind having to decide. You're becoming a Bermondsey woman. The thought is strange. The thought is, at this moment, with the hot potato in your hands and the fog on your face and your body aching in ways you now know by name, neither frightening nor reassuring, it simply is. The room on Grinley Row. Grinley Row is 3 streets from Grindle Street, which is either a coincidence or reflects some long ago naming habit you've never investigated. It is the same type of street, narrow, brick, fog permanent, but it has a slightly different quality from the Laundry Street. It has the quality of sleep, of people coming home. Number 14 is a terraced house occupied by a Mrs. Briggs, who is the landlady, and by 7 tenants, 4 in the 2 large downstairs rooms, and 3, including you, in the 2 attic rooms. Mrs. Briggs is 60, small, capable, and has opinions about cooking smells and the hours at which the front door can be opened. She's not unkind. She's simply an operator of a household, and you are, from her perspective, a component of that household, one whose rent arrives on time and who has not yet caused a problem. The attic room you share contains a bed, a washstand, a chest of drawers shared between you and 2 other women, a hook on the back of the door, and a window. The window looks out over the backyard, which contains a privy, a washing line, and a coal bunker. The room is cold. It is always cold in November. The attic room has a fireplace of theoretical capability, small iron grate. But coal costs money, and the 3 women in this room collectively decide most evenings that the strategic reserve of coal must be maintained for the genuinely cold nights, rather than squandered on a merely cold night. Tonight is a merely cold night. You can tell by the precise quality of the cold, which is damp and still rather than sharp. Sharp is the cold that justifies coal. Damp still is the cold that you manage with an extra layer and the proximity of other bodies in a small room. The other 2 women in the attic room are Ellen Marsh, who works in the pickle factory 3 streets away, and comes home smelling of vinegar in a way that is simply part of the shared air of the room now, and Susan Cooper, who does piecework at home, needlework, finishing the edges of garments for a middleman who pays by the piece, and pays not quite enough, and who is therefore usually in the room when you arrive. Susan is in the room now, seated at the window table in the last of the grey light, her needle moving fast through a length of fabric that you recognise as shirt-sleeve edging. She looks up when you come in. "You look terrible," she says. "Hospital day, you say?" She nods. This is sufficient explanation. You take off your coat and hang it on the hook. You take off your boots, which are damp through. They are always damp through by evening this time of year, and set them near the cold grate. You sit on the edge of the bed in your stockinged feet, and feel the specific relief of weight leaving your legs. The relief of sitting down after a full day on your feet in a laundry is something that does not reduce in intensity with familiarity. It is, each evening, approximately the same amount of profound. Your feet, your back, your hands. Your hands in the cooler air of the room begin to ache in earnest. The suppressed pain of the day, which the work itself and the concentration and the steam and the movement all hold at a manageable level, surfaces now in the quiet. The palms, the knuckles, the torn skin at the web of the thumb. You flex your fingers slowly, feeling the resistance in the joints, the thickened skin pulling slightly at the creases. You look at your hands, then you look away. Susan's needle moves. Outside, very faint through the attic window, the sound of Bermondsey at evening. A cart, voices, a dog, the distant metallic clang of something industrial that has no intention of observing the end of the working day. "There's bread downstairs," Susan says, not looking up. "Mrs. Briggs said we could take from the loaf on the counter." "Did she?" "She was in a good mood. Her nephew came." You stand up, which involves a negotiation with your back, and go downstairs to get bread. You eat your bread standing at the kitchen table, which is the informal gathering spot of the house. Not a warm gathering, not a social gathering particularly, just the place where the residents of 14 Grindley Row coincidentally converge in the evenings, because the kitchen has a fire and the other rooms don't. Mrs. Briggs's kitchen fire burns with the comfortable permanence of a landlady's prerogative. She can afford to keep it lit. She chooses to keep it lit. The warmth spreads into the hall and up the stairs, and if you stand here long enough it reaches you. You eat your bread and stand near the warmth and let your back untighten degree by degree. Ellen Marsh comes in from her shift at the pickle works, unwinding a scarf that she hangs on the kitchen door hook. She smells of malt vinegar and the cold. She is 20 and from Ipswich, and has been in London longer than you, 2 years, and has the particular quality of someone who has fully metabolized the transition. London is just where she lives now. The novelty wore off 18 months ago, and what replaced it is something more like ownership. This is my city. I have earned it. It belongs to me as much as it belongs to anyone. You want that quality. You're not sure when you'll have it. Ellen gets her bread, stands next to you, eats in comfortable silence. "Hard day," she says eventually. "Hospital cart came, and a private bundle from Chelsea that nobody talked about." Ellen raises her eyebrows fractionally. "What kind of nobody talks about?" "The kind that doesn't have a ticket." Ellen absorbs this. "Well," she says, "those happen." "Mrs. Dempsey had me finish it." "She trusts you then. You consider this?" "I suppose." "That's good," Ellen says, with the practical certainty of someone who has navigated enough workplaces to understand what trust means in them. That's what you want. Get trusted. Get useful. Then you get to stay inside in winter when they send the new girls for the yard work. She says this with absolutely no irony. This is the ambition available to you right now, in this room, in this life, to be the one who stays inside in winter. And the thing is, and this is the thing you have been slowly discovering for 3 months, the thing is, that's not nothing. That's not a small thing. The hierarchy of trust in a workplace like Hartley's is real, and it matters and it shapes every day of your working life. The women who are trusted get the better work. They get the interesting tasks. They get told things that the untrusted women aren't told. They get to stand near the fire at break. They get assigned the Chelsea bundle instead of being kept away from it. You eat your bread and think about what it means to be trusted with the thing nobody talks about. It means you can be counted on to know the difference between what you understand and what you repeat. You can hold information in your hands and do the right thing with it and then let it go. That is, in the end, what Mrs. Dempsey was testing. Not your technique, not your knowledge of cold water and soap and linen quality. Whether you could be trusted to know what you know and say nothing. You could. You did. Later, much later, when the room on Grindley Row has settled into its night sounds, Ellen asleep beside you, Susan's needle finally still, the house creaking its Victorian brick creak around you. You lie on your back in the cold dark and look at the ceiling and think, this is what you do when you should be sleeping. You think. Your mother writes, in her letters, about the village, about the hedgerows going bare, about the butcher's wife having a child, a boy, about your father's knee, which had been bad since harvest, which you knew would be bad since harvest, which is why you're here in Bermondsey rather than there in Chaddesley Corbett. Your father's knee, your younger brother's apprenticeship fees, the practical arithmetic of a family with more need than income. You are here because of the practical arithmetic. You knew this when you came. You know it now. It hasn't changed. But the shape of what you're doing here has become more complicated than you expected. In Chaddesley Corbett, going to work in London was a simple concept. You go, you work, you send money, you return. Here, inside the thing, it is less simple. Here, the work has a texture. It has a skill set you didn't expect to discover, and it turns out that learning a skill, really learning it, in your hands and your muscles and your chemical knowledge and your ability to read a stain, produces a feeling that you didn't expect to feel in a laundry. Something like competence. Something like belonging to a thing you've earned the right to belong to. You think about the Chelsea sheet, hanging clean in the drying rack above the ironing floor. You got the blood out of it. The specific blood from whatever specific event happened in a house in Chelsea that nobody will talk about has been removed from the fabric. The sheet is white again, ready to be returned. Whatever story it told, it no longer tells it. You have erased the evidence of a private disaster and returned the thing to the world as if nothing happened to it. You think about Mrs. Hawkins saying, some things come through this room, and you do the work, and it goes back out and the world continues. You think about what the world would look like if nobody did this work. It would look like the reality of bodies, the reality of blood and illness and birth and the 10,000 private disasters of living in a body in a city. It would be present in the linen, in the fabric, in the household objects that touch people at their most private moments. Someone has to remove it. Someone has to take the evidence of life's difficulty and return it to clean. That someone is you. And Nell and Kitty and Mrs. Hawkins and Mrs. Dempsey and Frances Tully, who fainted from the heat, and the 40 women bent over their sinks in the steam. The city doesn't know your names. The people at Pemberton Square don't think about you. The woman who owned the sheet from Chelsea, who sent it without a ticket, hoping anonymity was possible, she doesn't think about you. She just needs the sheet clean and returned, and she gets it, and she doesn't wonder at whose hands it passed through. Invisible. That's the word. Your work is invisible because it's supposed to be invisible. If you do it right, there's no trace of you in it. The linen comes back perfect, and perfect linen doesn't announce itself. Only damaged linen is visible. Only the failed work is seen. You do your work well, and it disappears. This should feel, perhaps, like a complaint. Oddly, Lying here in the dark with your aching hands folded on your chest, it doesn't. There's something in the invisibility that is also a kind of power. You know what you know. You've seen what you've seen. You carry it and you move on, and the work is done and the world continues. That's not nothing. That might, in fact, be everything. Let me tell you about Sunday, because Sunday is different, and you need Sunday the way your lungs need the cold air from the open window, the way the linen needs cold water before it can become clean. On Sundays, Hartley's is closed. The law says so. No commercial laundry on the Lord's Day. Some of the women use Sunday for their own washing. The irony of a laundress spending her day off doing laundry is not lost on anyone, but the irony doesn't change the fact that your own clothes and Susan's nightdresses and Ellen's apron still need washing, and it doesn't get done during the week. But you have a Sunday ritual of a different kind. 2 streets north of Grinley Row, just off Bermondsey Street itself, there's a building that was built in 1843 as a warehouse and converted in 1861 into a ragged school. A school for children who can't afford school, and then converted again, partially in 1869, into something less easily categorised. A reading room, a meeting hall, a lending library of approximately 300 volumes, a space that is open on Sunday afternoons to anyone who pays the penny entrance and conducts themselves with reasonable decorum. You found it in your 4th week, following Ellen, who had discovered it in her 2nd month, and considers it one of the 2 or 3 facts about Bermondsey that justify the smell. It is called, without grand ambition, the Bermondsey Improvement Rooms. The name is accurate. It is a room. It has improved things. This particular Sunday, the 3rd Sunday of November, you're there by 1 o'clock, early enough to get the chair nearest the reading room's iron stove, which puts out a dry, clean heat entirely different from the industrial heat of the laundry. A good heat. A heat with no agenda beyond warmth. You have a book. The lending library at the improvement rooms runs to novels, scientific volumes, improving essays, and a set of encyclopedias that are 12 years old, and therefore contain information that is almost current. You have been working through the novels with a focused pleasure that is entirely separate from your working life. You read the way you eat the hot potato from the street cart, with both hands hungry all the way through. Today's book is a novel you've already read 1 chapter of, North and South by Mrs. Gaskell, which is about a woman from the south of England who moves to a northern industrial town and is confronted by the reality of factory work and the people who do it. You chose it because the title seemed relevant. You have been in it for 2 weeks. You sit near the stove with a book open in your lap and read. But before reading, before your mind settles into the story and the real world recedes, you do something you've been doing for 3 months. You look at your hands, right hand, left hand, lying open in your lap under the book. They are not the hands you arrived with. The arrival's hands were rough in a country way, outdoor rough, wind and field rough, the roughness of a girl who helped with harvest and drew water from a well and kneaded bread. That roughness was ordinary. These hands are laundry hands now. The skin at the knuckles has thickened and darkened, settling into creases that hold the stain of the washing chemicals even after thorough washing. The tips of the fingers are slightly hard. The burn circle on your left wrist, the iron scar from your 4th day, has become something you trace sometimes without noticing, a small, smooth landscape. Your thumbnail is slightly split on the left side, from the place where you caught it on the scrubbing board edge last week, and it's growing back. Capable hands. Working hands. You'll have these hands for the rest of your life. You open your book. The reading room fills up around you as the afternoon progresses. A Sunday crowd, which has its own character. Laundry women you recognize from other establishments on the street. A few older men who come every week and read the newspapers in severe silence. Some younger men who come because it is warm, and there are sometimes women, and women who come because it is warm and there are books, and a handful of children who've been brought by parents and who sit under the encyclopedia shelf, looking at the pictures of animals in faraway countries. The woman who runs the improvement rooms is called Miss Calder. She is 40, angular, and has the quality of someone who has decided what she thinks about the world and implements it with practical efficiency. She runs the lending library with a firm but unsentimental hand, and she knows the reading habits of her regulars well enough to make recommendations. She stops by your chair an hour in. "How is it?" She nods at the book. "I keep thinking about the mill town," you say. Whether Mrs. Gaskell actually went to see one. "She did," Miss Calder says. "Manchester. She knew the factory owners and the workers both. She was thorough." A pause. "Does it feel true to you?" You consider this. The part about the work feeling different from what you expected. Yes. Miss Calder looks at you with the expression she uses when she's deciding whether to say a thing. "There's a pamphlet," she says. "On the shelf, end of the row, blue spine. Women's work in London's laundries. 1871. A sanitary inspector's report. You might find it interesting." "Interesting how?" "The numbers," she says. "What the work does to the body, measured over time. They measured it. Someone thought it was worth measuring." She moves away. "End of the row, blue spine." You finish your chapter, then you get up and find the blue spine. It is a thin document, official in format, a government inspector's report on working conditions in commercial laundries, with particular attention to the effects on the worker's health. It is written in the careful language of officialdom, which means that the things it says are worse than it sounds like they're saying. Steam and chemical vapours, associated with respiratory degradation in 73% of workers employed more than 5 years. Musculoskeletal damage, documented in the lower back, shoulders and wrist joints, with particular severity in workers employed on the scrubbing stations. Skin conditions, dermatitis and chemical burns reported in 68% of workers. Heat-related illness, significant across all establishments surveyed, with peak incidence in summer months, though present year-round in facilities operating boiling coppers. Average age of retirement from laundry work due to health-related inability, 47 years. You read this last figure twice. 47. Mrs. Hawkins is 41. You think about Mrs. Hawkins's breathing, the roughness you can hear when it's quiet, the way she moves in the mornings, the slight stiffness that eases as the day warms her joints. 47. You are 15. You have 32 years, possibly, before the work finishes with you. Or you leave before that. That is also an option. Leaving. Finding something else. 2 years. You said to yourself in Chaddesley Corbett. 2 years, save what you can, return or move on. 2 years is still the plan. The plan has not changed. But you're beginning to understand, here in the reading room with the blue pamphlet open in your lap, why the plan is harder to execute than it sounds. Because leaving requires somewhere to go. Leaving requires an alternative, something to go toward, and the alternative has to be better enough to justify the leaving. And the alternatives available to a 15-year-old girl from Worcestershire with laundry experience and no other formal training are not nothing. Not nothing. You are literate. You read novels. You can write a sentence that doesn't disgrace itself. Mrs. Briggs's household is managed entirely by Mrs. Briggs without a servant, but there are households in London that need servants, and service is warmer and less chemical than laundry work, and the body damage is of a different and possibly less severe kind. Or there's the work that Miss Calder does, which is a kind of work you don't fully understand yet, but which seems to involve knowing things and making them available and believing that the knowing matters. 47. 32 years. You close the pamphlet and sit with it in your lap for a moment, watching the fire in the stove. Then you pick up your novel. Mrs. Gaskell's heroine is standing in a northern street watching a factory chimney and thinking about the life she hasn't chosen and the life she has, the gap between the two and what it means to live in the middle of that gap with her eyes open. You read until the light fades. On the way home from the improvement rooms you take the long way, not consciously at first. You turn left instead of right out of the building, and you keep walking, and the longer way home takes you along Bermondsey Street itself, the main road, older than most of what surrounds it, running down from London Bridge in the north through the heart of the leather district. Bermondsey Street at 4 in the afternoon on a November Sunday. Fog, always fog. The shops are shut. Sunday, everything legitimate closed. But people are in the streets, families, couples, a man with a dog on a rope, children running ahead of mothers who call after them in voices that carry the specific flat tone of women who know they won't be obeyed and have made their peace with it. The smell of the tanneries, which doesn't close on Sundays because the chemical processes involved in making leather don't observe the Sabbath, drifts from the east. Under it, the river smell coming from the north, salt and mud and something cold. You can see, if you stand at the right angle on Bermondsey Street, down a gap between two buildings, a sliver of the Thames, not much, just a suggestion of grey water between grey buildings with grey sky above it. The river. You've been to the river twice since you arrived in London. Once deliberately, on a Sunday in September when you walked up to London Bridge to see it, to stand above the water that you had heard about all your life, the river that is at the centre of every story about this city. And once accidentally in your second week, when you got lost running an errand for Mrs. Dempsey and ended up at the river wall in Southwark, confused and slightly frightened, looking down at the Thames at low tide with its brown mud banks and its smell of something ancient and not entirely pleasant. The river doesn't look like it does in paintings. Paintings of the Thames tend toward the silver and the romantic. The Thames is brown and working, and it smells of what has been put into it, which is everything, which is all of London's waste finding its way to the water. But it is large. It is unmistakably, powerfully large. And standing above it, you feel something that has no precise name but is related to the feeling of standing in the improvement room's reading room and looking at the encyclopedia pictures of faraway countries, the feeling of the world being larger than the room you are currently in. You stand at the gap between the buildings and look at the sliver of grey river. Ships are on it, barely visible through the fog, their shapes dark against the grey. They come in from the sea, up through Gravesend and Woolwich, and they are carrying things from places you have never been and may never go. The tobacco warehouses in Southwark, the spice wharves east of the bridge, the timber yards, the wool imports, the sugar coming up from the West Indies refineries, processed in factories in this very borough, the sugar factories of Bermondsey, whose workers come home white-dusted like millers, but from a different kind of grinding. Everything comes up the river and is processed in this part of the city and is distributed to the households of London. The baronets in Pemberton Square and the surgeons at Bart's and the theatre company in the Strand and the anonymous person at 4 Carlisle Mews, Chelsea. They all exist downstream of this. Their linen, their tablecloths, their operated on patients, their private disasters, all of it eventually comes to women like you in rooms like the laundry on Grindle Street, to be made clean and returned. The world's commerce flows in one direction. The cleaning of it flows in another. You stand in the gap between the buildings until the cold begins to reach through your coat in the particular insistent way of a November riverside, and then you walk home. The week after is the week of the frost. It begins on Tuesday night, when you wake at 2 a.m. because the cold has changed quality, shifting from the damp, still cold, you know, to something sharper, something with edges, something that has decided to be serious about itself. By Wednesday morning, when you arrive at the laundry in the dark, the cobblestones on Grindle Street are glazed with ice. Not thick ice, not yet, but the beginning of it. A silver coating over the stone that makes every step a small decision. Inside the laundry, the cold is immediately defeated by the coppers, which have been burning overnight and which have raised the temperature of the washing floor to something survivable, even by 6 a.m. But the windows, already fogged, have ice crystals on the inside of the glass, and the water in the stone sinks, which have been standing overnight, has a temperature at which your hands feel the shock of entry before adjusting. Frost changes the work. Cold water is colder. The chemicals work differently in colder temperatures. Soda takes longer to dissolve. Soap resists creating a lather. The scrubbing that produces results in summer requires more effort in a frost. The steam from the coppers is more dramatic, more visible. The contrast between the boiling water and the cold air, producing great rolling clouds that fill the washing floor faster than usual. The women's breath is visible. You can see the exhalation of 40 women at work, the warm breath condensing in the cold air above their heads, mixing with the chemical steam. It makes the washing floor look different, stranger, more alive or more ghostly, depending on how you look at it. Mrs. Hawkins at the station next to yours scrubs with the same rhythm as always, but you notice that she rubs her hands together between pieces, the cold in the joints. Mrs. Hawkins, you say. Your hands. Working, she says. A statement, not a reassurance. The frost. It's harder. It's always harder in the frost. She picks up her brush. It's also always harder in the heat. The work doesn't get easier based on the weather, Agnes. You get better at it regardless of what the weather is doing. She scrubs. You scrub. The ice crystals on the windows slowly melt as the day's heat builds, and by mid-morning the washing floor is back to its usual subtropical temperature, and the outside cold is irrelevant again, and only the stiffness in your cold-started joints remembers that there is a frost outside. But frost also means something else. Frost means the drying lines outside are useless. Wet linen put outside in a frost doesn't dry, it freezes. This sounds almost poetic, and perhaps it would be from a distance. White sheets on a line turned solid with cold, stiff and glittering in the pale frost sun. But from the perspective of the laundry, sheets that freeze on the line are sheets that come back in rigid and stiff, and have to be thawed before they can be ironed, which adds time and complicates the drying schedule, which means the inside drying racks are working beyond capacity, which means the upper floor of the building, The ironing and drying floor becomes even more crowded than usual. The rails packed so close together that moving between them is like walking through a white forest. You spend an hour on Thursday morning moving linen from the outdoor lines, where it has stiffened overnight into angular white shapes that clatter against each other, and carrying it inside. The sheets are cold against your face and hands. They smell of frost. Not of ice exactly, more like the absence of smell, the negative space of warmth, the smell of something that has been stripped of whatever it usually is. You carry them in armfuls, the cold linen against your chest, up the stairs to the crowded drying floor, finding spaces on the rails between the already hanging pieces. The ironing women move around you, working steadily, their irons going back and forth in the warm, dry air. One of the ironing women, her name is Rose, she's been ironing here for 11 years, tells you where there is space on the rails by pointing without speaking, because her hands are never free, the iron always moving, her attention always on the temperature and the fabric and the particular work of pressing. Rose's forearms bare to the elbow from working near the heat, covered in the fine scar lines, the writing of the irons, years of it. She looks up briefly as you hang the last of the frost sheets. "Done?" she says. "Done." She nods. Back to the iron. 11 years. By Thursday evening, you know something has changed in the Chelsea matter. You don't know what. You don't know specifically. You know the way you know things in this building, through the texture of the air, through the quality of the silences, through what Mrs. Dempsey does and doesn't say. What Mrs. Dempsey doesn't say is, has the Chelsea sheet been collected? What she does say is nothing. Nothing about it. It is hanging on the drying rack, pressed and folded now, wrapped in brown paper, ready for collection, and it has not been collected. On Friday morning, a woman comes to the reception door. You're not in the receiving room, you're on the washing floor. But you hear the front bell, and then the sound of Mrs. Hartley coming out of her office, and then voices. A woman's voice, quiet and particular, and Mrs. Hartley's voice, careful and professional, and then footsteps going toward the finished goods room. A few minutes later, footsteps going back to the front door, the street door opening and closing, Mrs. Hartley returning to her office. Nothing, no announcement, no comment. At break, you go upstairs to the drying rack on a pretext. You tell Mrs. Dempsey you need to check on the positioning of some hospital linen, and you look for the brown paper parcel. It is gone. The drying rack rail where it hung is empty. You go back downstairs. At the sink, Mrs. Hawkins is already at work. She doesn't look at you. "Clear water, third change," she says, which is a comment on the piece you were working before break. It is also, you understand now, the end of the matter. Clear water, the stain is gone. The linen has been collected. The matter is resolved. The world continues. The week closes on Saturday afternoon. Saturday is a half day. The laundry closes at 2, and after clear up you're free by 3:30, which is freedom of a specific kind. You have 2 hours of daylight left and a whole halfpenny from the week's remaining wages, and the option to do anything at all within those constraints. You walk north, not deliberately. You just start walking and let your feet choose, because your feet have been walking this city for 3 months and they have learned things about it that your conscious mind hasn't fully processed yet. North from Grindley Row, through Bermondsey Street, up to the river wall at Battlebridge Lane, the low stone wall that runs along the south bank of the Thames, where you can look out over the water. Saturday, afternoon in November on the south bank. The river is low today, the tide out, exposing the broad grey mud banks on both sides. The mud is full of mudlarks, children and old people who come down to the river at low tide and search through the mud for anything useful, anything salvageable. Pieces of coal that have fallen from barges, rope, nails, the occasional coin. They move through the mud with the patient focus of people for whom the margin between having enough and having nothing is exactly this. What you can find in the river's mud on a Saturday afternoon. A girl, maybe 8, working the mud 20 feet below you. She's ankle deep in the grey-brown stuff, moving methodically, her head down, her hands busy. She has a canvas bag over her shoulder and she's putting things into it with a careful selectivity that suggests she knows exactly what she's looking for and what she isn't. She looks up once, at nothing in particular, and you see her face, ordinary, serious, a child's face doing a grown person's work with a grown person's concentration. And then she looks back down, across the river, the north bank, the city in its November aspect, church spires in the fog, the dark bulk of warehouses, the dock cranes reaching up. The dome of St. Paul's, barely visible through the murk, just the suggestion of a curve against the lighter fog. It is the greatest city in the world. This is a fact that everyone here knows and accepts, the way they accept the tannery smell and the October mud and the water that runs slightly brown from the taps. It is the greatest city in the world. 4 million people. The centre of a trade empire that extends around the globe, and here is its south bank at low tide. A girl in the mud, searching for coal, the smell of the tanneries, the laundry women walking home through the fog with their cracked hands wrapped in their coat pockets. The city contains all of it. The grandeur and the mud, the warehouses full of wealth and the mudlarks in the shallows, the Pemberton Square baronetcy and the cotton from the Chelsea sheet. You lean on the river wall and look at all of it. You've been here for 3 months and 2 weeks. You've washed blood out of fabric in quantities and varieties you didn't know existed before you arrived. You've learned the difference between a birth stain and a surgical stain and the kind that you don't talk about. You have learned to press and roll instead of wringing, and to change the water when it's pink, and to hear the difference between the boiling copper at full heat and the boiling copper at the temperature where it's working too hard and needs to be damped down. You have a burn scar on your left wrist and a split thumbnail and hands that are going to look like laundry hands for the rest of your life. And you have, this is what you didn't expect, you have something like a place here, a position in the small geography of Hartley's, a position that Mrs. Dempsey confirmed by assigning you the thing that nobody talks about. You have a corner of the reading room at the improvement rooms where you read your novels on Sunday afternoons near the stove. You have 2 women you share a room with and walk to work with in the mornings and eat bread with in the evenings. You have the route home by heart. It is not what you came for. It is not what you planned. 2 years, you said, and you still say it, and 2 years is still the plan. But this is not nothing. The girl in the mud finds something. She examines it, a piece of coal from the shape of it, and puts it in her bag with the care of someone adding to something valuable. The fog is thickening. The north bank is fading into greyness, the dome of St. Paul's vanishing. Your hands are cold. Time to go home. Sunday evening, the attic room, Ellen asleep on her side of the bed, the vinegar smell part of the room's natural atmosphere now, as unremarkable as the creaking of the house in the wind. Susan's needle has been still since 9. She sleeps face up, which is unusual. Most people curl. And in the grey light from the small window, her face is peaceful in the uncomplicated way that faces are peaceful when the person wearing them has worked hard enough and long enough that sleep is not a transition but a falling. You're still awake. Your back is familiar now, in the way that permanent things become familiar. You know its language. The long complaint of the working day, the slow vocabulary of muscle and bone that has been adapting for 3 months to demands it was not designed for. You lie still and let it speak and don't argue with it. Your hands are on the blanket. In the dark, you can just see them. 2 pale shapes in the grey light from the window. The faint, darker lines of the cracked knuckles. The small, smooth landscape of the iron scar on the left wrist. You think about the report Miss Calder gave you. The blue pamphlet. Average age of retirement, 47. You think about Mrs. Hawkins, 41, whose breathing is rougher than it was, the steam working its way into the deep tissue of her lungs, year by year, the way water works its way into stone. You think about Rose, the ironing woman with 11 years written in thin scars up her forearms. You think about the women who do this work and have always done it, and will keep doing it as long as there is linen and as long as there are bodies to produce the things that go into linen, and as long as the city needs itself kept clean, which is forever, which is as long as cities exist. You think about the Chelsea sheet, clean and returned. You think about the woman who collected it. Quiet, particular. Whatever happened to her on whatever night in that house in Chelsea, she is continuing. She went to the laundry on a rainy Friday morning and she collected her clean linen and she went back to her life. That is what women do. That is what women have always done. They survive the thing that happens and then they go and collect their clean linen and they continue. You think about your mother in Chaddesley Corbett writing her letters about the hedgerows and the butcher's wife. You think about the Sunday when you will write back properly, more than the brief lines you've been managing, the letter where you tell her what it's actually like. Not frightening, harder than you expected, strange in ways you couldn't have anticipated, and not nothing, definitely not nothing. Outside, London continues its Saturday into Sunday existence. Somewhere to the north toward the river, a church bell is marking the hour. You count without meaning to. 11. On the street below, footsteps. Someone coming home late. The particular uneven rhythm of someone who's had enough to drink to make the footsteps interesting, but not so much that they can't navigate. The footsteps pass. Silence. The fog, which has been present all day, thickens at night. You can see it at the edge of the window, pressing gently against the glass, that particular quality of London fog that makes you feel the city has pulled a curtain around itself, that outside these walls there is only the close, warm grey nothing of a foggy night. Inside these walls, 2 sleeping women, the creak of the house, the cold that is managed slightly by bodies sharing a room, the small circle of warmth that is yours specifically, the warmth you have generated, the heat of a body that has been working hard and is now, finally, resting. Your back settles, your hands are still. The brush and the water and the steam are far away now, at the other end of the dark, behind the fog and the sleeping city, waiting for Monday morning the way they always wait. The soak tubs drained and rinsed, the scrubbing boards hanging dry, the coppers banked low overnight, keeping just enough heat that by 4 in the morning, when the fires are brought up and the water begins to fill, the whole thing will be ready again, the whole machinery of it, waiting. But right now, not yet. Right now, there is just this room and these women and this small, manageable dark. You close your eyes. The fog outside does what fog does. It settles. It deepens. It presses gently against the window as if testing whether you're still awake. You're not still awake. The work falls away from you the way it falls away every night, in degrees, the brush in your hand loosening, the water cooling, the sound of the coppers growing faint and then fainter. The steam thins, the smell of lye recedes, the stones sink, the scrubbing board, the heavy wet linen, all of it growing lighter and lighter until it is not there at all. What remains? The dark, the cold that is manageable, Ellen breathing on your left, Susan's still face, the creak of the house, the church bell marking another quarter hour you don't need to count. You've earned this. The city knows what you did this week, even if it doesn't say it, even if it never says it. The linen is clean and returned. And the households of London sit in their clean beds on clean sheets and they don't wonder how. But you know how. You know the cold water first. You know to press and roll. You know to change the water when it's pink. You know to hold the thing that can't be spoken and set it down when the work is done and let it go. You know, in your hands, in the language your hands have learned, in the chemistry of your cracked and competent and blue-stained fingertips, what it means to make something clean. That knowledge is yours. Nobody can take it from you. The fog settled against the glass. Somewhere far away down in Bermondsey Street, a last pair of footsteps going somewhere, going home, going wherever people go at the end of a Saturday night in a city that never quite sleeps. You let them go. You let the night have everything. The work will be there in the morning. The coppers will be up. The linen will be waiting. But that's morning. Morning is a long way away. Right now there is only this, the dark, the warmth, the fog. You warm enough, tired enough, safe enough. You have a roof and work that matters and hands that know what they're doing. And 2 years that are still the plan, and 1 year of this to go and somewhere north of the river, the laundry and Mrs. Hawkins and Kitty's, whispered commentary, and Mrs. Dempsey's silence that means everything, all of it waiting for you, all of it yours. That's enough, more than enough. Let it come. Let the sleep take you the way it takes all the women in all the rooms of all the working streets of this city, the exhausted and the capable and the quietly knowing. Let the sounds fall away. Let the fog settle. Let your hands rest. The blood comes out in cold water. The stain gives up eventually if you're patient. The linen comes back white. The world continues. Tomorrow the bells will ring and the coppers will be hot and the linen will arrive and you will know what to do. But not yet. For now, just this. Just the dark and the quiet and the particular piece of a body that has done everything it was asked to do today and is done asking. Good night. Good.